Welcome to episode 80 of your CySA Plus Prepcast. In this episode, we examine the critical issue of identification and authentication failures, which are among the most frequent and impactful vulnerabilities encountered in enterprise environments today. These failures directly enable unauthorized access, lateral movement, data theft, and privilege escalation. As cybersecurity analysts, your ability to recognize, detect, and prevent such issues is essential both for operational protection and success on the CySA Plus certification exam. Authentication is the gatekeeper of every secure system, and when it fails, no downstream security measure can reliably compensate. To begin, it is important to clearly distinguish between identification and authentication. Identification is the process by which a user presents an identity claim, such as a username or user ID. Authentication, on the other hand, is the mechanism used to confirm that the claim is valid, typically through a password, token, biometric input, or multifactor method. When either process is flawed or misconfigured, the system becomes susceptible to unauthorized access. Weak authentication allows threat actors to impersonate legitimate users, while poor identification implementation may expose the system to account enumeration or impersonation vulnerabilities. Authentication and identification failures arise from a variety of root causes. Among the most common are weak password policies, insecure credential storage mechanisms, poorly designed session management, and absent or improperly implemented multifactor authentication. Analysts must consider each of these failure points not in isolation, but as part of a broader identity assurance system. These weaknesses can be exploited individually or chained together by attackers in increasingly sophisticated attack paths that allow privilege escalation or access to sensitive systems. Weak or default passwords are a consistent source of vulnerability across organizations of all sizes. Despite long-standing guidance from industry and regulatory bodies, many systems still rely on simple, easy-to-guess passwords or leave default credentials unchanged. Attackers use brute force techniques, password spraying, and dictionary attacks to guess credentials, often succeeding due to predictable patterns or reused passwords. Analysts advocate for strong password policies and systematic credential auditing to reduce this threat surface. Credential stuffing attacks represent another widespread vector of authentication failure. In these attacks, threat actors take compromised credentials from data breaches and test them against unrelated systems, relying on users' tendency to reuse passwords. Organizations that do not implement password reuse detection or do not integrate with credential breach monitoring services remain vulnerable to this threat. Analysts play a key role in configuring authentication systems to detect abnormal login patterns, prevent credential reuse, and require multi-factor verification. Insufficient account lockout mechanisms are another common failure point. Without proper rate limiting, attackers can repeatedly guess passwords or usernames without consequence. Analysts implement lockout policies that temporarily disable accounts after a specified number of failed login attempts, along with throttling controls and suspicious activity alerts. These protections significantly reduce the effectiveness of automated brute force attempts and credential guessing bots targeting exposed login portals. Session management is also a recurring area of vulnerability. Sessions that use predictable tokens, fail to expire properly, or are not securely transmitted allow attackers to hijack user sessions and impersonate legitimate users. Session fixation attacks manipulate session identifiers to predefine a victim session value, while session replay attacks capture valid sessions for reuse. Analysts must configure secure session identifiers, enforce HTTPS transport, implement timeouts, and use cookies with secure HTTP only and same-site attributes to reduce this risk. Multi-factor authentication is one of the most effective defenses against credential-based attacks, yet its implementation is often inconsistent. Systems may provide MFA options but fail to enforce them across all users or allow fallback to less secure methods. Attackers increasingly target MFA bypass mechanisms, such as social engineering of support staff or exploitation of session cookies. Analysts must evaluate the strength of MFA implementations, enforce MFA for high-privilege accounts, and monitor for incomplete enrollment or bypass conditions. Authentication logic flaws also contribute to serious vulnerabilities. Password reset mechanisms that rely on easily guessed security questions or unauthenticated password reset links can be exploited for unauthorized account access. Similarly, insecure recovery processes may allow an attacker to hijack an account without knowledge of the original credentials. Analysts assess these flows for logic errors, missing verification steps, and exposure to enumeration or tampering. To detect these vulnerabilities, analysts combine automated tools with manual inspection. Vulnerability scanners often identify exposed login interfaces, weak configurations, and known authentication weaknesses. Tools like Burp Suite and OWASP ZAP allow for active testing of login flows, token handling, session persistence, and account recovery logic. These assessments are complemented by manual techniques that simulate real-world attack scenarios, such as credential reuse, account enumeration, and session hijacking attempts. Detection is only one part of the analyst's responsibility. Effective response involves comprehensive documentation of findings, identification of systemic failures, clear remediation guidance, and ongoing tracking. Analysts document detected vulnerabilities, provide technical and policy-based remediation recommendations, and help define secure configuration baselines. These documents support audit requirements, facilitate communication with developers and system owners, and ensure that improvements are retained over time. For more cyber-related content and books, please check out cyberauthor.me. Also, there are more security courses on cybersecurity and more at baremetalcyber.com. Mitigating identification and authentication failures begins with enforcing robust password policies across all organizational systems. Analysts recommend minimum character lengths, complexity requirements that include upper and lowercase letters, numbers, and special characters, as well as routine password exploration schedules. Reuse of previous passwords should be strictly prohibited, and users must be educated about avoiding predictable or personal password patterns. In combination with secure password policies, analysts implement systems that prevent common passwords from being accepted at all, often using dynamic block lists of breached or unsafe password patterns. One of the most effective defenses against credential compromise is widespread adoption of multifactor authentication. Analysts enforce MFA on all systems that support it, particularly administrative interfaces, cloud portals, and external-facing services. Proper implementation includes ensuring that MFA cannot be bypassed through legacy protocols or alternative login methods. Systems should be evaluated for weak MFA types, such as SMS, which can be vulnerable to interception, and replaced with stronger authentication factors such as mobile app-based tokens or hardware security keys. MFA should be mandatory, not optional, for any account that provides privileged access or stores sensitive information. Credential storage practices must be hardened to prevent the exposure of user secrets in the event of a system compromise. Analysts ensure that all stored passwords are hashed using secure, modern algorithms such as bcrypt or Argon2, and that proper salting mechanisms are in place to prevent hash collisions. Plaintext storage is strictly prohibited. Additionally, analysts oversee the protection of cryptographic keys used in authentication systems, verifying that they are not hard-coded in source code or stored insecurely. Secure storage practices also extend to third-party systems and identity providers integrated through single sign-on or federation. Session management presents another domain requiring strong controls. Analysts configure session cookies to include security attributes such as secure, HTTP only, and same site, preventing their exposure over unencrypted channels or through client-side scripts. Sessions must be uniquely generated using strong randomization functions and expire automatically after inactivity or a predefined duration. Systems must protect against session fixation by regenerating tokens after authentication and must log all session events for audit and detection purposes. These measures prevent attackers from abusing active sessions and help analysts trace misuse. Penetration testing is used to validate authentication defenses in practice. Analysts simulate attacks using automated tools and manual techniques to evaluate password policies, brute force resistance, session handling, and MFA enforcement. These tests provide evidence of whether documented security controls are functioning as intended and whether any overlooked authentication paths exist. Testing is conducted regularly and during major system updates, ensuring that any regressions in authentication security are identified early and remediated before they are exploited. Account lockout policies are implemented to counter repeated unauthorized access attempts. After a predefined number of failed logins, accounts are automatically locked or temporarily suspended. Analysts ensure that lockout thresholds balance usability and security to avoid unnecessary service disruptions, while still frustrating brute force attempts. Logging and alerting are configured to notify administrators of repeated login failures, enabling further investigation and threat response if malicious activity is suspected. Continuous monitoring plays a key role in authentication security. Analysts configure logging systems and SIM platforms to flag unusual login activity such as logins from new geographic regions, multiple failed attempts followed by success, or rapid credential testing across accounts. Monitoring tools can also detect the reuse of old sessions, use of expired tokens, and access attempts using deprecated protocol. These insights help analysts respond to credential compromise attempts and continuously improve authentication controls. Incident response planning must address credential and authentication breaches. Analysts define clear procedures for responding to session hijacking, credential theft, unauthorized account access, and MFA bypass. These plans include immediate response steps such as account disabling, forced logouts, credential rotation, and log review. Communication procedures are also outlined, including how users are notified and how forensic investigations are initiated. Analysts ensure that incident lessons are incorporated into future system hardening efforts. Continuous analyst training is essential for staying ahead of evolving authentication threats. Analysts must understand the latest attack techniques against login systems, session protocols, password recovery flows, and identity management solutions. Regular training covers secure configuration practices, emerging MFA technologies, and advanced penetration testing techniques. This knowledge enables analysts to maintain strong identification and authentication defenses that adapt to a changing threat landscape. Finally, documentation is the foundation for sustainable authentication security. Analysts maintain detailed records of authentication vulnerabilities discovered during testing, policies enforced across different systems, penetration testing outcomes, remediation timelines, and compliance alignment. These records support audits, track progress over time, and provide a blueprint for onboarding new analysts and security engineers. Well-maintained documentation ensures that lessons learned are preserved and that security maturity continues to grow. To conclude episode 88, we've explored the identification and authentication vulnerabilities that attackers frequently exploit to gain unauthorized access, from weak passwords and session hijacking to misconfigured MFA and insecure credential storage. These issues can lead to wide-reaching compromise if not addressed with rigor and foresight. As cybersecurity analysts, your role is to detect, mitigate, and prevent these vulnerabilities through technical hardening, policy enforcement, monitoring, and collaboration with system owners. Mastering these areas not only supports your CySA Plus exam goals, but also positions you as a key contributor to the protection of your organization's digital identity infrastructure. Continue applying these insights as we move forward through the certification journey. Thanks for listening. To learn more about cybersecurity, please visit baremetalcyber.com. There you will find best-selling books, videos, and even more free cybersecurity training courses. Please subscribe to the Prepcast and our various podcasts. And thanks for listening.